You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're listening to Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Locked On Mets is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. On the show today, very simple, we are discussing the net result of the Carlos Correa transaction, which has created the best infield in baseball. I'm going to go through why this is going to be the best infield defensively, offensively, altogether. There is not a team that stacks up to the New York Mets right now. Before we get into that, though, I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor and where I wrote an article that'll be going up at some point on Friday based on this exact same topic. The New York Mets have created the best infield in baseball. It's pretty simple. You got the batting champ, right? Jeff McNeil, you can make an argument, is the worst player of these four, and he's the batting champ. He had .326. He edged out Freddie Freeman late in the season to get it. You got Pete Alonso with all the power. You got Francisco Lindor, and then enters Carlos freaking Correa. It still doesn't feel real, does it? We'll see when that becomes official, but we know this is in place here. I cannot see a possibility, big knock on wood, that this falls through, because Steve Cohen is not going to let Mets fans have that disappointment. And boy, what an infield that's going to be. I know the natural push would be to talk offense, and we're going to get to that in the next segment. But can we just discuss how incredible the infield defense for the Mets is going to be this year? If you're Justin Verlander and you took that leap of faith, as he said in the press conference, that the Mets were going to build a team around you, and you did know at the time, well, I got Lindor, I got McNeil, I got Alonso. That's probably the biggest thing that he had in his back pocket, knowing, all right, well, at least the Mets have that in place. You add Carlos Correa to that infield defense. Do you have any idea how good Carlos Correa and Francisco Lindor are defensively, and putting them together? Because suddenly you have two guys who have won a platinum glove. Do you know what a platinum glove is? That's awarded once a year to only one defender in baseball, who is the best overall defender in the game. In 2016, Francisco Lindor became the first Puerto Rican-born shortstop to win a Gold Glove award. He was also awarded with the Platinum Glove award that season. 5 years later, Correa joined him. Now, he would have been the second Puerto Rican-born shortstop to get a Gold Glove, but actually Javi Baez won one in the 2020 season. But those are the three guys that played together on the Puerto Rican national team in the World Baseball Classic, where Baez played second, Correa played third. They've all won their Gold Gloves at shortstop. And for Correa in 2021, he also wins the Platinum Glove. So two Platinum Glove minted defenders joining forces on the same side of the infield. And now without the shift, you need good infield defense. The Mets starting rotation has that since their debut in 2015. You look at the two defensive metrics, right? There's two main ones that we look at, right? Outs above average, which is the one I prefer because it's a little more range-based, and I like that. I like to know that these guys, especially without the shift now, have that range to make the plays, and they have defensive runs saved, the other big metric. Francisco Lindor, since his debut, 2015, leads all fielders in baseball with 115 outs above average. He is pacing all the other shortstops by over 30 outs above average. Unbelievable. Now, for some reason, defensive run saved does not favor Lindor quite as much. He has 40 defensive runs saved since his debut, which still puts him in the top 10 among shortstops over that span. He's at 7th. But Carlos Correa, when you look at defensive runs saved, that metric loves him. Okay, so defensive runs saved, you got Andrelton Simmons, who's still the leader. Say hello to Hershey, who's barking upstairs. Got a full house here on vacation, okay? It's the holidays, Hanukkah, Christmas. We got everyone in one place. So if you hear a baby crying or a dog barking, I apologize. But, and I would go in the past when I've recorded here at my sister's house, I'd go outside in the car and do it. But that's usually over the summer where I'll sweat a little bit. I'm okay with that. Right now it's like 3 degrees outside and there's a snowstorm. So I'm going to stay in the basement here recording. But back to my point. Carlos Correa has 70 defensive runs saved. That is the second best mark to Andrelton Simmons and the fifth best mark among all defenders in baseball since his debut. So we're talking about two of the best defensive players in baseball on this same side of the diamond. That's amazing. And also, according to Scott Boras today, he said Carlos Correa is not only open to playing third base, but eager to do so. He believes at the position it'll allow him to bulk up more without sacrificing his defensive aptitude. So maybe at shortstop, he felt like he had to be a little bit more nimble, a little bit quicker on his feet. Now as a third baseman, he's going to put on a little more mass. That might give you some more pop. So maybe instead of being a 25 home run guy, suddenly Carlos Correa is going to be hitting 30 tanks this year. Love that. And also, he's got the arm for it. This guy might have the best arm in all of baseball. You now put that at third base. And go watch some highlights from the World Baseball Classic. I believe they're both playing again, so we'll get to see it on that big stage. And then know as we're all rooting for Puerto Rico now, because if you're a Mets fan, at this point, as much as you might be rooting for Team USA, until those two teams square off, you got to be rooting for Puerto Rico with Edwin Diaz, with Lindor, with Correa. That's going to be fun to watch. So you have that in place. And you wonder, how can it translate? You know, it's just a tournament. Is Correa going to be able to do it? We've seen Manny Machado, former shortstop, incredible over there. Nolan Arenado at one point is early on, I believe in high school, maybe college. I don't even know exactly. I know he started as a shortstop before he eventually became a third baseman. He's now the 10-time reigning Gold Glove winner at third base. Could Correa finally be the one to knock him off his mantle? I think it's possible. That's how good I really believe he'll be. Now, on top of that, you got the flying squirrel, Jeff McNeil, at second base, and he played an exceptional second base this year, posted 8 outs above average. That tied him with Tommy Edman for the top mark among all National League second basemen. So you got him in place as well. Now, let's just say Canna goes down for a month, or Marte goes down. They decide, man, we gotta shift McNeil into the outfield for a little bit. Who's going to fill in? Louis Guillorme, an incredible defender in his own right. And I think Guillorme really is going to be a piece that I hope they hang on to, because as much as you could say we got Eduardo Escobar, we're fine. Danny Mednick, another move they made, I should point out, he signed for $1 million. That's a stash move, right? That's a roster depth thing. He did put up good numbers. We'll discuss that in a little bit, actually. So I'll get to that later. But regardless, you want Guillorme in place, because if McNeil goes down, or if you have to move McNeil into the outfield, you want Guillorme to be your starting second baseman, because he can do a great job keeping you in that place defensively that you want. So the Mets defense this year for their pitchers is going to be amazing. The only hole defensively they got is Pete Alonso. And as much as the defensive metrics were not kind to him this year, he really regressed. When you watch him day in and day out, like I think we all have, I'm never looking at Pete Alonso and saying, yeah, he's the problem out there. I think he plays a good first base. He feels the position well. He's able to scoop a lot of those throws. He's really got good with his footwork around the bag. He might not get to everything. And now we got Hershey eating in the background. If you hear that, I apologize. Like I said, packed house. But Pete Alonso defensively is really a lot better than I think the metrics even really credit him for. So I don't think that's a problem for the Mets at all. But today's episode is brought to you by the NHTSA. Did you know that driving high is considered driving under the influence? That's right. Driving under the influence of marijuana is against the law in every state, even in states where marijuana is legal. That means driving high could get you a DUI. And if you think law enforcement officers can't tell when you're driving high, you're wrong. Your friends can tell. Your coworkers can tell. Even your parents can tell. Everyone can tell. So what makes you think that a law enforcement officer won't know when you're driving high? Driving under the influence can slow your response time and change how you perceive time and speed. So even if you think you're fine to drive when you're high, you're not, because the bottom line is, if you feel different, you drive different. And driving high is driving under the influence. So remember, drive high, get a DUI. so we already discussed the gloves, and as I said, I mean, it's going to be tough to find a better infield defense than what the Mets are going to put out next season. Really the one team that we can look towards when it comes to the defense is the Astros to me, because you got Jeremy Pena. He's exceptional out there. You got Altuve, always been a strong defender. Abreu, the new addition, he's going to help him a lot with the bat at first base. Third base, Bregman's great. So that's the one infield out there that I actually look at and say, yeah, they might be on the same level. There's some other teams that we can look at, the Phillies. And actually defensively, let's give the Padres their credit. You got Fernando Tatis is going to be the outfield most likely. So Machado is going to be your third baseman. Xander Bogaerts going to be your shortstop. I think that's where they have the biggest hole, where without the shifting, Bogaerts' woes defensively are likely going to return. That's where I don't put them on the same level. And then offensively, as we get into the comparison there, you got Ha-Seong Kim. He's a really good defensive shortstop, now moving to second. Jake Cronenworth also could be a shortstop. He's at first. Defensively, I think that they're pretty solid, but I think having Bogaerts be their starting shortstop hurts them as their Achilles heel of their infield defense more than Alonso for the Mets. And then offensively, as much as you like three of the four in Cronenworth and Bogaerts and Machado, I think Kim leaves something to be desired. Like a Phillies infield. I think if we include the catcher position with JT Realmuto, they're in the conversation. But Bryson Stott and Alec Boehm still have to show a lot. Rhys Hoskins is terrible defensively. So even though they got Trey Turner now, and that definitely bolsters them, gives them a really good infield, I don't necessarily view them in the same class as the Mets. And you look at the Braves, I think Vaughn Grissom has to prove it before we can put them into that same conversation. There's just really not a lot of teams that stack up to the Mets. The Astros are the one, because you look across the board. Pena, Bregman, Altuve, Abreu, all great hitters. Defensively, that they all can hold their own. But the Mets, I like their defense a little bit better, because really nothing in baseball is going to be better than that left side of the infield for the Mets defensively. And I look at the offensive side here. I mean, we'll start with Pete, because Pete Alonso is going to get so many RBI opportunities this year. We saw him clean up just like, we just watched in 2022 getting 131 RBIs. I think we'll see a similar type of season. But you also got to understand, no one has hit more home runs than Pete Alonso since he made his debut. Now, granted, Aaron Judge hasn't played nearly as many games, but, best ability is availability, and Pete Alonso has been durable. You look at what he did, 53 pumps in 2019, breaking Aaron Judge's record. 16 in a 60-game season in 2020, 37 homers in 2021. It was, at one point, it felt like a down year, but then he righted the ship. Then last year, 40 home runs. I don't see any reason why Pete Alonso can't do another 40 home run season, if not better. Since his debut, 146 homers in 530 games played. He's always been right there with Ryan Howard with the most home runs hit, at the early part of his career when it comes to games played, homers hit. So that is obviously your offensive anchor right in the middle of the lineup in the cleanup spot. We don't know how they're going to line it up. You got Nimmo, of course, but you also got now McNeil and Lindor that can table set. And you got Correa that can potentially be protection for Alonso, batting fifth. I like that a lot. Or they can bat him third, put Lindor second. There's a lot of ways the Mets can maneuver this lineup. But you look at Lindor this past season, he drove in 107 runs. McNeil, again, batting champ, 326 average, posted a 143 WRC plus. Again, weighted runs created plus measures hitters based on a league average of 100. So a 143 WRC plus for McNeil means he was 43% better than your league average hitter. The 12th best mark in baseball. Who else had that mark? Pete Alonso did. It's ironic that their other season when they were both All-Stars in 2019, they again mashed each other in WRC plus, and they do it in completely different ways. For Alonso, it's slug, and for McNeil, it's on base. And also average, obviously. That year was a 144 WRC plus for the two of them. Now you throw in another 140 WRC plus guy in Correa. With that, the Mets infield has 3 of the top 20 hitters in baseball last season when it comes to weighted runs created plus. As much as you might love what the Astros have, I don't believe they had 3 top 20 guys. Let me actually look that up so I can make sure I'm correct here, because, I mean, I know that Pena, while he was incredible in the playoffs, was not a top 20 hitter prior to that. So let's look here. They got Jordan, but he's not in their infield. Altuve was at a 164 WRC plus last season, so he is in the top 20. And that's it. Bregman's at 23 when it comes to WRC plus at 136. Where is Jose Abreu was 21st. So they're right there. I mean, that's the other infield. That's the one to look at. But, for the National League, I don't think there's a question the Mets have the best infield altogether. And just look at the top 5 hitters in the Mets lineup next season. I don't know what the order is going to be. I think Marte falls to 6th. I think Marte is going to be in the 6th hole next year because he's just not as good as the top 5. I think Nimmo's going to bat leadoff. They hyped him up as they signed him to be the starting center fielder and the leadoff hitter. Again, that was his spot all last year. I think they go back to it. He hit 274 last year, 367 on base, 433 slugging, 16 homers for Nimmo. Outside chance he could get to 20 next year. A 134 WRC plus. He only struck out at a 17.2% clip, walked at a 10.5% clip. Lindor, a 270 hitter, 339 on base, 449 slug. He had 26 homers, drove in the 107, like I said. Strikeout rate under 20% at 18.8. Walk rate at 8.4. WRC plus at 127. Correa, 291 average, 366 on base, 467 slugging, 22 homers, 64 ribbies, but that was on a bad team. 20.5% strikeout rate, 10.3% walk rate, very good there. A WRC plus of 140, as I mentioned. Alonso, a 271 hitter. All these guys hit for a high average. You love it. 352 on base, 518 slugging, the 40 homers, the 131 RBIs. Struck out an 18.7% clip. Got that rate under 20% for the second year up, but last year it was like 19.9. This year he's right there. 9.8% walk rate for Alonso. 143 WRC plus. As I said, McNeil, same mark. Hit 326, 382 on base, 454 slugging. He only struck out 10.4% of the time, Jeff McNeil, one of the best bat-to-ball players in baseball, if not the best. So you put it all together, 4 guys in that infield who are above average offensively, well above average. 3 guys who are well above average defensively. This is the best infield in baseball. Now, the only question is, what is the depth behind it? And that's what we're going to get to next. But first, another word from our sponsors. So who is the backups that we should be looking at when it comes to the best infield in baseball? Because again, obviously we're looking at the starters, but we don't know if the starters will be there all year. And one addition they made was adding Danny Mendick. Now, it's a 1-year deal, $1 million. He is hurt. He tore his ACL, I believe it was in June. He was playing good before that, though, last season for the White Sox. 31 games played. He walked at a 6.6% clip. That's not great. But the strikeout rate at 21.7 is really good. Isolated power at 155. That's strong. But here's the big one. 289 average. 343 on base. 443 slugging. Had 3 homers. Drove in 15. A 125 WRC plus. So he had a really good offensive season. 106 plate appearances. Limited sample. But you pick up the guy for $1 million. And he has options, so you can stash him in AAA at 2 minor league options. That's why they picked him up. Not necessarily to supplant a Guillorme or an Escobar or a Beatty or anything like. He's not above any of them in the hierarchy, but a really high-end depth option to add on here. And you get him because probably no other team was going to give him $1 million. Mets did. Gotta love Steve Cohen. Now, beyond that, right? That's some minor league depth, and they didn't have a bunch of it. I mean, look at their roster. It was Vientos, and if you want to call Ruff a first baseman, yeah. And Ronnie Mauricio is some depth in the minor leagues, but I got a feeling with Lindor and Correa, we might see some outfield Ronnie Mauricio this season, so we'll see what they decide to do with him. What else can they look at here as far as depth? As I already alluded to, I think you keep Guillorme. And if I know Buck Showalter from this past season, he loves him some Louis Guillorme. I just don't see them moving him. So if Guillorme is your backup at third, short, and second, Eduardo Escobar is the interesting case here. I think the Mets likely keep him because he is as high-end of a bench bat as you can get. Switch hitter, better from the right side so you can have him be the right-handed half of a DH platoon with Vogelback. If Correa gets hurt, here's your starting third baseman. If Lindor goes down, Correa slides to short, Escobar's your starting third baseman. If McNeil goes down, I don't think Escobar's your starting second baseman. That's the one place where I don't see it. I know that he has played second in the past, but man, he was not good defensively last year at third base. I know it looked better by the eye test than the defensive metrics will tell us. So it's a little bit, I don't think he was bad. I don't think he was J.D. Davis. I think he was very passable. But I don't think his range is there. And to put him at second base without the ship next to Pete Alonso, that doesn't work for me. And that's where Escobar's a little bit more expendable. Not saying definitely, but I think ultimately you're going to get to a point where Brett Baty is just going to be more valuable as kind of a bench ancillary piece than Daniel Vogelback or Eduardo Escobar. Because he can play left field. I think that's where they're going to start him in Syracuse because ideally, if he's awesome, he's a top 100 prospect. If he is as good as he can be, because that bat is legit, he could be the guy that pushes Canha to a fourth outfielder role. That's not to say I don't like Mark Canha as a starting left fielder. That's to say this is a high-end Mets team that's going to have four guys getting playing time in the outfield at some point this season. And as much as we could see them go out and get an Adam Duvall, which is still an option, if they just go with a defensive fourth outfielder, Baty's a guy that can be your backup third baseman. He can be your DH. He can take some time away from Canha in left field. You can, on some occasions, let's say you want to get Pete off his feet for a day, you can put Canha at first, you can put Baty in left if you want to. I don't know, maybe Baty has a first base glove in his bag. Maybe Baty gets some time at first base. I think he's athletic enough where he's never going to be an exceptional defender, I don't believe. But I think he can get himself passable in left, at third, and at first. With some DH at bats, I think there's a lot of playing time for Baty this season, and I think that just raises the ceiling. But you don't have to count on it. That's what I've already said these moves do for the Mets. They put their prospects in the advantageous position where you can use them, but you don't need them. And that's beautiful. So, look, the Mets have depth. They have upside. They have a high floor, a high ceiling. They are just rocking and rolling when it comes to their infield. I think their outfield probably needs a piece, but that could be a Travis Jankowski type, or that could be an Adam Duvall type. We'll just see what's left. I mean, there's not a ton of free agency. They had some interest in A.J. Pollock. If Pollock wants to win another ring, I think he did win one with the Dodgers in 2020, but if he wants to win another one, he wants to kind of chase the championship. That's a veteran that maybe signs over and says, I'm going to get some DH at bats. I'm going to find my way on the field, and maybe it's A.J. Pollock. But time will tell what the Mets' next move is. Based on this week, it'll probably be about 15 minutes after I finish recording and try to put a bow in this podcast to get a poster for you guys on Friday. Anyway, though, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, @FinkelsteinRyan. Follow the show, @Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day, now for your second listen. Check out Locked On Sports Today, hosted by Peter Bukowski. Locked On Sports Today is where you want to go to stay up to date with everything going on in Major League Baseball. Follow Locked On Sports Today on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get podcasts.